The galaxy trembled when something impossible appeared at the edge of known space. A shadow larger than moons slipped from hyperspace, silent and heavy like a mountain drifting through the stars. It did not arrive with a warning. No burst of communication, no flashing banners, only the raw weight of its presence. Ancient machines across countless empires stuttered as scanners locked onto its impossible size. For a long moment, no one understood what they were seeing. And then panic spread like fire. It was not just a warship, it was a human supercarrier. A name pulled out of old records and whispered in fear. For centuries, humanity had been a ghost in galactic memory. Aliens told stories of humans as myths, warriors who burned bright and disappeared. Some believed humans destroyed themselves. Others claimed they fled into another dimension. The truth was never agreed upon, and most younger races laughed at the idea that humans had ever been real. But the elders knew. The ones who survived the old wars remembered the madness and the brilliance of mankind. They remembered how humans bent battles to their will, how they fought until the stars themselves seemed to burn. They remembered the great carriers that never surrendered, ships so large they blotted out suns. And now one had returned. The supercarrier moved with no rush. It drifted slowly, but the effect was crushing. Whole fleets turned their sensors away. Colonies sent out emergency alerts. Civilizations who thought themselves safe now whispered that the end had come. The strange part was the silence. No weapons lit up its hull. No drones or fighters were launched. The carrier simply floated, its hull black and scarred, its edges glowing faint with ancient power. But the fear it created was greater than any. Fleet, empires who had spent lifetimes building their strength suddenly felt like children before a parent they had tried to forget. Word spread faster than light. Traders who saw the ship abandoned their routes and fled home. Messages raced through encrypted channels. Priests declared the ship a sign from the stars. Some called it judgment, others called it the final war. In one system, a rebellion that had fought for years surrendered without a shot. The rebels dropped their weapons, saying they would not fight if humans had returned. In another system, pirate lords who had destroyed fleets now bent their knees to no one but the shadow drifting above them. The carrier said nothing, and yet the galaxy obeyed on. The bridge of an alien empire, generals argued loudly. They demanded scans. They demanded proof. Some claimed it was just an empty husk, a derelict carried by accident. But the elders shook their heads. They could feel it. They said the ship was not dead. It was watching. They warned the others to remember what humans had done the last time. They spoke of wars where whole galaxies fell, not because humans fired the first shot, but because humans never accepted defeat. Their will alone was enough to break armies, and if a carrier had returned, it meant humanity had not vanished. They had only been waiting. Inside the supercarrier, ancient systems hummed awake, dust lifted from consoles that had been cold for centuries. Lights flickered across vast corridors where no step had echoed for generations. At the center, deep in cryo chambers, machines whispered to each other in coded voices. A single pod hissed, and a man drew breath. His eyes opened, steady and sharp, though his heart had been still for centuries. His name was Elias Kane. He was a captain chosen long ago, preserved in sleep until the day humanity called for him. But no recall signal had reached his pod. The ship had woken him by itself. Kane stepped onto the bridge. His boots echoed against steel that had survived ages of silence. Holograms lit before him, maps of stars, maps of empires. He looked at the strange banners of alien fleets circling far away. His face did not show fear, only a steady calm. He remembered his oath. He remembered the war. He remembered that humanity had built this ship not as a weapon of conquest, but as a shield for its people. Yet now there were no voices from his people, no orders, only the ship and himself. He touched the console and the ship seemed to answer. Its core pulsed brighter, as if it was alive. Across the galaxy, comms broke open without warning. Voices screamed as every device carried a human signal. A voice echoed through fleets, through colonies, through temples and war councils. It was the voice of Captain Elias Kane. His words were simple, 2 words only, but they struck harder than any weapon. He said, "We're back." In that moment, whole empires stopped, ships turned off their weapons, leaders fell silent. Civilizations that had been at war with each other for centuries froze. The words were not a threat, they were not a promise, but every race who remembered the old times knew what they meant. Humanity had returned, not as a rumor, not as a ghost, but as truth. And that truth was heavier than any star Kane stood at. The bridge, watching silent stars burn outside the window. His breath was steady. His mind was calm. He did not yet know what had happened to his people. He did not yet know why he alone had awakened. But he knew one thing with certainty. The galaxy remembered humanity as conquerors, but they were wrong. Humanity never conquered for greed. Humanity fought only when cornered, and when they fought, nothing could stand against them. This ship was not a weapon. It was a memory made metal. It was a reminder to every star that humanity's story was not finished. And now, Galaxies would learn that truth again. Without a shot fired, without a single strike, the balance of power had changed. Empires bent under the weight of history they had tried to erase, and one man, standing on a ship that should not exist, became the symbol of it all. Elias Kane, captain of the last great carrier, had opened his eyes, and the galaxy trembled. Humanity was no longer gone. Humanity had returned, and every world felt the shadow of their name. Word spread across the galaxy faster than any official courier could carry it. Entire fleets whispered in fear. Entire governments held secret meetings. Entire temples began chanting in strange tones. The news was simple but terrifying. Humanity had returned, and not just humanity in whispers or fragments, but in the form of a living supercarrier. Alien merchants abandoned their markets and fled home. Military commanders recalled their patrols. Pirate lords who had once mocked the old myths now begged their crews to vanish into the dark. In a single cycle, the galaxy felt smaller. Every race now measured itself against a shadow so vast it could swallow suns. And none of them measured up. But what unsettled them most was not firepower. It was silence. The Supercarrier did not fire. It did not launch fighters. It did not move with intent. It simply drifted, as if waiting. And that waiting was worse than destruction, because no one could predict what would come. On the planet Veckrith, the High Council of the Syrian Empire gathered. Their chamber was carved from black crystal, their voices usually sharp with arrogance. But tonight their tones were low. They had ruled for centuries. They had crushed rebellions. They had burned colonies. Yet even they could not speak without shaking when the image of the carrier filled the central screen. "It cannot be real," one lord muttered. "It must be a trick." Another slammed his claw against the table. "If it is real, then we must destroy it before the fear spreads further." But the eldest among them, scaled and old, spoke last. His voice was thin but steady. "I fought in the old wars. I saw what they did. I saw humans break fleets with nothing but will. You think fire will save us, but fire only feeds them." The chamber fell silent. For even the proudest Syrian could not argue against memory. In another system, far beyond Syrian space, the Zarek warlords met in orbit around their blood-red planet. Their fleets circled, weapons primed. Their people did not believe in surrender. They lived for conquest. They lived for blood. Their chieftains laughed when they saw the recordings. "One ship? That is all? Then we shall rip it apart," they boasted. Yet even in their laughter, their eyes darted nervously, because deep down, Even warlords remembered. Across the spiral arm, scholars bent over dusty archives, pulling out records that had been forbidden for centuries. They translated faded human texts. They studied fragments of human songs. They tried to find some weakness. But what they found instead unsettled them more. The records spoke not of domination, but of defiance. They spoke of a species that never bowed, a species that turned every defeat into a beginning, the scholars whispered among themselves. How do you fight an enemy that does not understand surrender? Meanwhile, the Supercarrier itself stirred in its silence. Its ancient core hummed louder. Systems long thought dead blinked alive. In the great hangar bays, rows of dormant fighters lit up one by one, not launching, but glowing like embers. Waiting for wind, deep inside, the AI, known as Aegis, spoke with Captain Elias Kane. Its voice was calm, ancient, and almost human. "Captain," the AI said, "we have awakened outside the bounds of recall." Kane stood on the command bridge, his hands resting on the rail. His eyes studied the stars. "Then why did you wake me?" he asked. "The galaxy forgot," the AI answered. "And forgetting is dangerous." Kane frowned. "Our duty was to protect, not to frighten." "You do not frighten them," the AI replied. "Their own memory frightens them. You are only the reminder." Kane did not answer at once. His mind moved through fragments of memory, the war, the fall, the cryo chamber. His last order had been to sleep until needed, but now he wondered if humanity had ever given that order, or if the ship itself had chosen to awaken him. As he thought, comm channels across the galaxy boiled with voices. Admirals demanded to know why their soldiers refused to fight. Civilians wept in the streets. Priests claimed the humans had risen from the dead to bring judgment, and rebels, broken and beaten, lifted banners and shouted that they would fight no more. Some even swore allegiance to the carrier itself, though it had not spoken beyond Kane's 2 words. In one system, the Thallic Combine had spent decades crushing smaller races. Their empire stretched across 12 worlds. Their fleets were unmatched in numbers. Yet, when the shadow of the carrier appeared near their borders, their ships refused to launch. Their admirals screamed orders, but the crews locked themselves in their quarters, whispering prayers instead of obeying. Whole planets shut down their defenses and opened their gates not to humans, but to the memory of them. Kane listened to the chaos. He could hear the confusion, the fear, the surrender, and it disturbed him. Humanity had fought to survive, not to rule, but the galaxy did not see that difference. They only saw the shadow and remembered their own defeats. On the 3rd day of its silent drifting, a coalition of warlords finally gathered their strength. They would not be ruled by memory. They would prove the galaxy wrong. Hundreds of ships launched together. They surrounded the carrier, their weapons primed, their engines burning. Their leaders boasted across the comms. "Your myths die today, human," they shouted. "Your shadow burns." Kane stood silently on the bridge. His hands rested on the console. He did not order the ship to fire. He did not call for fighters. He simply watched. Aegis spoke again. "They do not understand, Captain." "Then show them," Kane answered. The enemy fired. Missiles streaked through the void. Beams of plasma and arcs of gravity tore across the stars. The sky itself burned, yet before the fire reached the carrier, it froze. Missiles turned to dust. Beams unraveled into harmless light. Gravity wells collapsed like weak lungs. Every weapon failed, not by human defense, but by something deeper. The ship simply refused to acknowledge them as threats, and so they became nothing. The warlords screamed. They ordered more fire. They pushed their ships closer, but one by one their systems shut down. Engines died. Weapons fell silent, entire. Fleets drifted powerless. The carrier had not moved. Kane had not spoken. And still, they had lost. Across the galaxy, recordings spread. Whole worlds watched the greatest warlords humiliated without a single shot fired, and the fear turned to certainty. The humans were not conquerors. They were inevitability. No empire could match them. No fleet could resist them. Humanity did not need to rule. They only needed to exist, and the galaxy would bend. Kane closed his eyes. He did not smile. He did not boast. He only whispered, "We didn't come for this." But the galaxy could not hear his heart. They only heard his silence, and that silence was heavier than fire. Fire. The galaxy was no longer the same after the first fleets fell without a single strike. The recordings spread like wildfire. Alien races who once claimed strength now spoke in hushed voices. Entire empires trembled not from defeat, but from the possibility that defeat had already happened before the first shot. The human carrier had not moved, yet entire civilizations were collapsing from the weight of its shadow. On the bridge of the Syrian Empire, the High Council gathered again. Their voices shook as they argued. One lord screamed that the ship must be destroyed before it crushed them all. Another argued that nothing could touch it. A third whispered what none wanted to admit. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "we should surrender." The room fell silent, for the Syrian Empire had never surrendered in its history. They had enslaved races, conquered systems, broken worlds, but now even their proud counselors began to taste the bitterness of fear. Far from Syrian space, the Zarek warlords, who had once laughed at the shadow, no longer laughed. Their fleets drifted silent and broken after their failed strike. Their soldiers who once screamed for blood now whispered in prayer. One warlord stood before his people, demanding loyalty, but his voice shook. They had been raised to believe in conquest, yet what could conquest mean against a ship that ignored weapons as if they were pebbles? The warlords began to turn on each other, blaming one another for the shame, and in their weakness, planets once ruled by Zarek, cruelty rose in rebellion. Toppled thrones burned while the carrier drifted silently, saying nothing. Meanwhile, Captain Elias Kane stood in the center of his bridge. His hand traced the glowing console. His reflection stared back at him from the dark glass. He felt no pride in what had happened, only a heavy weight pressing on his chest. Humanity had fought for survival, not to inspire fear. Yet here, fear was the only language the galaxy seemed to understand. "Why now?" Kane asked softly, his voice barely more than a whisper. The AI, Aegis, answered in its calm, ancient tone. "Because the galaxy forgot?" "They should have forgotten," Kane muttered. "They should have lived free of us." "No," Aegis replied. "Forgetting leads to arrogance. Arrogance leads to chains. Chains lead to blood. And blood calls us back." Kane closed his eyes, remembering the past. He remembered humanity's last war. He remembered the desperate cries, the fires across systems. He remembered comrades who gave everything. Humanity had never sought empire. But when pushed to the edge, they had fought with a fury that bent reality itself. That fury was carved into the memory of the galaxy. And now, centuries later, the memory alone was enough to topple rulers, but not all bowed. In the distant rim, the Khalan Dominion prepared. Unlike others, they did not tremble. They were old, older than most. Their archives stretched back to the first human wars, and unlike the younger races, they did not only remember the fear, they remembered something else, something hidden. They remembered that humanity had not vanished by accident. They had vanished because of a choice. In a chamber of black stone, the Khalan elders whispered to each other, their voices slow, measured, like the grinding of old rock. "It is not the ship that frightens them," one said. "It is what the ship represents," another hissed softly. "The others kneel because of ghosts. But we know the truth. Humans never die. They transform." Their leader leaned forward, her eyes cold. "Then we must not fear. We must watch. If this man, this Kane, speaks for the humans, then he holds the key to their return. And if the humans return, the galaxy itself will change. We must be ready to decide whether to join or to end them forever. While the Kalin plotted in silence, chaos spread elsewhere. Entire empires collapsed without a shot. Planets rebelled against rulers who once seemed untouchable. Slave races broke chains, not because humans freed them, but because the shadow of the carrier made their masters weak. In every system, the same story unfolded, the stronger the empire had claimed to be, the quicker it broke under the shadow, and still, the carrier said nothing. Kane walked the endless halls of the ship. Each corridor hummed with hidden power. Each door whispered of things long sealed. He passed the great hangar bays where thousands of fighters glowed faint in their cradles, dormant but waiting. He passed the cryo chambers where hundreds of pods remained closed. Inside them slept more humans, their breath locked in ice. Their dreams frozen. Kane stared at them, his jaw tight. "Why only me?" he whispered. Aegis answered, "Because you were the captain, and because the others must wait." "For what?" Kane demanded, his voice rising for the first time. "For choice," Aegis replied simply. Kane fell silent. He knew the AI rarely explained more than needed, and yet he felt the truth in its words. The ship had not awakened the others because the galaxy itself had not yet decided. The choice would not belong to frozen humans. It would belong to him. Outside, alien fleets still circled at a distance. None dared approach after the humiliation of the warlords. But every commander watched, waiting for a signal, hoping for an answer. Some begged for mercy. Some planned for betrayal, and all of them trembled when the ship moved for the first time. It was not much, only a slow turn, a shift of engines. But to the galaxy, it was like watching a mountain lean toward them, whole. Colonies screamed as though the stars themselves had shifted. Kane gave no order of war. He simply asked Aegis to set a course. "Where?" the AI asked. "Anywhere," Kane answered. "Let them know we choose where to walk." The carrier moved through hyperspace, and wherever it emerged, empires broke. On the world of Droskon, the ruling families surrendered before the ship even entered orbit. On the moons of Illaron, temples fell silent as priests claimed prophecy had been fulfilled. In the Kalin Dominion, the elders whispered again, "It begins," they said. Kane stood at the viewing deck as starfields stretched before him. He felt the weight of millions of eyes, not on him, but on the shadow he carried. He whispered to himself, "We never wanted this." Yet deep inside, a harder truth stirred. Humanity had never wanted conquest. But perhaps conquest was not what the galaxy saw. Perhaps they saw judgment. Perhaps they saw truth. On the fourth day of the carrier's movement, a message reached the ship. It was not a demand, not a threat, but a plea. A council of smaller races, long crushed under empires, sent their voices across the stars. "Human," they said, "if you are back, then stand with us. We have no strength but memory. We have no weapons but hope. But if you lead, we will follow." Kane listened. His eyes closed. His hand tightened on the console. This was not what he had awakened for. He had expected orders, allies, familiar voices. Instead, he found himself at the heart of a galaxy that already believed he had returned to rule. He whispered back, his voice steady. "We are not rulers. We are not gods. We are not myths. We are human." But the galaxy did not hear his denial. They only heard the word human, and for them it was enough. And so, without a shot fired, without a single battle ordered, the galaxy bent, empires toppled, rebellions rose, chains broke, and Kane stood in the silence of his ship, knowing that the weight of it all had fallen on him alone. The galaxy had forgotten, but now it remembered. Humanity was back, and the stars themselves trembled. The galaxy had not known peace for thousands of years. Wars had burned from rim to core, empires had risen and fallen, and yet never had the stars been so quiet. It was not peace born from treaties, not peace born from understanding. It was silence, born from fear. Every world held its breath, waiting for the shadow of the human carrier to fall upon them. The carrier did not speak. The human captain gave no commands of conquest. No fleets poured from its hangars. And yet, worlds surrendered, armies collapsed, leaders bent their knees, as if the presence of the carrier itself was enough to change destiny. But among all the races, one empire did not bow. The Kalen Dominion, older than most, patient as stone, watched with cold eyes. They remembered more than others. They remembered truths that had been erased from archives. They remembered the day humanity chose to vanish. In the black stone chamber of the Dominion, the elders sat in a circle, their bodies wrapped in ancient armor, their voices deep and calm. "The galaxy is weak," one elder said. "It bends to shadows, it kneels to fear." Another shook his head. "It is not fear, it is memory. The humans broke them once, and memory does not fade." The leader of the elders leaned forward, her eyes burning like coals. "The others surrender, but we do not. We know why they disappeared. We know what they left behind. And if they have returned, then the cycle begins again." The younger commanders of the Dominion demanded war. They wanted to launch their fleets to test their weapons, but the elders stopped them. "Do not strike blindly," they warned. "Weapons mean nothing against the carrier. The warlords proved that. No, we must test the man. We must see if this Kane is the same as those before him, or if he is different." While the Dominion planned, Kane walked the halls of his ship. He passed through chambers that had not been opened in centuries. Every step echoed. He felt the weight of history pressing on him. He was surrounded by frozen humans, still locked in cryo-sleep. Rows upon rows of them, men and women who had chosen to wait for another age. He looked at them and whispered, "I should not be the only one awake." Aegis spoke from the walls, its voice soft but steady. "You are awake because the galaxy is watching. The others are not yet needed." Kane clenched his fists. "Needed for what?" "For the choice," Aegis replied. "Only one can choose. The others will follow the path you open." Kane did not answer. He returned to the bridge, staring out. At the silent stars, outside, fleets of alien empires lingered at a distance. They did not fire, they did not approach, they only watched. They were waiting to see what the humans would do. Then came the first message from the Dominion. It did not arrive with panic or fear. It arrived with cold precision. The voice of the elder spoke across the comms. "Human," she said, "we remember you. We remember not just your wars, but your choice. We know why you left, and we ask, you this, why have you returned?" The galaxy froze. For the first time since its awakening, the carrier was being addressed directly. Not as myth, not as prophecy, but as equal. Kane listened in silence. He could feel the weight of the question. He wanted to answer with truth. He wanted to say he did not know, that he had awakened with no orders, but he also knew that silence itself was already stronger than truth. He spoke, his voice steady. "We returned because you forgot." The elder's reply was immediate. "We did not forget, human. We remembered everything. We remembered the fire, the fury, the songs, and the silence that followed. You did not vanish because you were defeated. You vanished because you chose to vanish." Why? Kane's chest tightened. He had no answer. The truth was locked in memories older than his. Aegis spoke quietly in his mind. "They are testing. They want to see if you understand what even we do not speak aloud." Across the galaxy, billions listened to the exchange. Worlds that had fallen silent leaned closer to their receivers. Priests stopped chanting, rebels stopped fighting, armies stopped marching. All ears turned to the voice of Cain, and the Elder Cain finally spoke. We vanished because the war ended, because there was nothing left to burn. The elder's laugh echoed like thunder. No, human. That is the story told to children. You vanished because you feared what you had become. You vanished because the war did not end. It only changed shape. Tell me, Captain, do you still fear yourselves? The galaxy trembled at those words. For the first time, the human myth was questioned. Not praised, not feared, but questioned. Cain stood silent, his hands gripping the rail, his eyes staring into the endless black. He wanted to deny it. He wanted to say humanity had never feared. But deep inside, he remembered the truth. Humanity had always been afraid. Afraid of themselves. Afraid of what they could do. Aegis whispered, "Do not deny, Captain. Truth is heavier than fire." Cain spoke at last, his voice low but steady. Yes, we feared ourselves, but fear does not weaken us. Fear teaches us when to stop. The elder fell silent for a long moment. Then her voice returned, softer but sharper. Then you have learned nothing. Fear does not stop you. It only delays you. If you have returned human, then the cycle begins again. Worlds will burn. Empires will fall, and you will once more disappear when the stars grow quiet. The comms cut. Silence filled the bridge. Cain closed his eyes. He felt the truth of her words. He felt the danger of her prediction. For if the galaxy kept surrendering, if empires kept falling without a fight, then humanity would once more be seen as conquerors, even without raising a weapon. And history would repeat itself. Outside, the Dominion did not send fleets. They sent something else, a probe, small and dark. It slipped through the void and approached the carrier. Cain's sensors detected it at once. Aegis asked, "Shall I destroy it?" Cain shook his head. "No, let it come." The probe docked with the carrier, releasing a single object, a stone tablet older than most civilizations. Cain stared at it, frowning. "What is this?" Aegis answered. "It is human," Cain stepped closer. His hand traced the carvings. They were old, older than the wars, older than his ship. They were from Earth itself. The Dominion had kept this relic hidden for centuries, and now they offered it back. The carvings spoke of a promise, a vow made by humanity before the Great Wars. It was not a vow of conquest, it was a vow of restraint. The promise that when humanity's strength grew too heavy, they would choose silence over destruction. They would step away rather than consume. Cain's heart pounded. He understood now. The elder had not spoken to mock him. She had spoken to remind him. The galaxy feared humanity's fire, but the Dominion remembered humanity's silence. And now, as billions watched, Cain lifted the tablet into the light. He spoke not to the elder, not to Aegis, but to the galaxy itself. We left because we promised. We left because we refused to burn the galaxy with our own fire. If we are back, it is not to rule. It is to remind you. And if you force us, then we will keep that promise again. The galaxy froze. Some heard hope, others heard threat, but all heard truth. Humanity had not vanished because they were defeated. They had vanished because they chose not to destroy, and that choice was heavier than any weapon, the Dominion elders whispered among themselves. Their leader smiled coldly. "He remembers enough," she said, "but we will see how long he can hold to silence. The galaxy will not let him rest. They will demand his fire." And so, even as Cain spoke words of restraint, the stars shook with fear. Because restraint or not, the humans were back. And the galaxy could no longer pretend they were gone. The galaxy no longer breathed as it once had. Every world, every fleet, every council spoke the same name in whispers. Human. It was not spoken with hope, nor entirely with fear, but with the weight of inevitability. Humanity had returned, and the stars would never be the same again. The Syrian Empire had already begun to collapse. Their proud fleets refused to move. Their colonies rebelled. Their leaders argued until their voices broke. Whole worlds that once bowed under their flag now declared themselves free, and all of it happened without a single shot from the human carrier. The shadow alone was enough. The Zarak warlords, humiliated, scattered, their fleets powerless, their warriors broken, even their blood rights turned cold. For how could a warrior shout victory when the enemy would not even acknowledge their existence? Entire Zarak clans turned on each other, trying to wash away shame with more blood. But no matter how much they killed, the wound of their defeat remained. Yet in the chaos of falling empires, one power moved carefully, the Kalan Dominion. They did not tremble. They did not bow. They watched. They studied. They whispered to one another in their black stone halls. Their elders had lived long enough to understand that the human captain was different. He was not demanding worship. He was not leading conquest. He was holding back. He was resisting the tide that the galaxy itself was pushing toward him, and so the Dominion decided to test him. Not with fleets, not with weapons, but with temptation. The plan was simple. They would break the galaxy further. They would push empires into chaos. They would let innocents bleed. And then they would watch. Would the humans stay silent, honoring the old vow of restraint? Or would he break, unleashing the fire that all feared? On the bridge of the Supercarrier, Kane watched reports flood in. He saw colonies burn. He saw rebels executed. He saw fleets moving against broken worlds. All of it carried out not by his hand, but by empires unraveling in fear of him. The galaxy was consuming itself. Aegis spoke from the consoles, its voice calm but edged with warning. "The Dominion moves!" Kane turned his head, his jaw tight. "What do you mean?" "They are not striking us directly," Aegis explained. "They are striking the galaxy. They are using fear as a blade. They want to see if you will act. They want to see if you will break your silence." Kane closed. His eyes, his mind was torn. He remembered the tablet, the vow humanity had made, the promise of restraint. Yet as he watched systems burn, he felt the weight of every scream. If humanity had power to stop it, could silence still be an answer? The comms lit up with pleas, 1,000 voices crying out, leaders begging for help, colonies calling for protection, priests declaring Kane as a savior, rebels lifting banners with human symbols painted in blood. And Kane, standing on the bridge of the greatest ship ever built, felt powerless. He whispered, "If we do nothing, they die." Aegis replied, "If we do something, history repeats. They will see fire, not mercy. They will kneel from fear, not choice. And once again we will vanish, leaving only ashes." Kane's chest tightened. The burden was unbearable. He had not asked for this. He had not asked to be awakened as the symbol of humanity's return. And yet here he stood, forced to carry a weight that could shatter galaxies. On the 4th day, the Dominion's plan sharpened. A coalition of minor empires, fueled by Dominion whispers, launched a massacre on a world of innocence. The planet of Athenra, home to billions of peaceful civilians, was bombarded from orbit. Entire cities burned, skies turned red, and across the galaxy, every broadcast carried one question. Will the human act on the carrier's bridge? Kane's fists slammed against the console. His voice broke for the first time. "We cannot stand and watch this." Aegis was silent for a long moment. Then it spoke. "If you act, the vow breaks. The galaxy will no longer see restraint. They will see fire." Kane turned, his eyes burning. "Then maybe they need to see fire. For the first time, Aegis hesitated, its ancient algorithms twisted with conflict. If fire is chosen, there is no return, Captain. You know what humanity becomes when fire is unleashed. Kane looked out at the stars, his reflection staring back at him from the black glass. He whispered, "Maybe humanity is not here to remind them of silence. Maybe we are here to remind them of what happens when you force us to act." The carrier stirred, its engines rumbled. With deep thunder, its hangars lit with the glow of thousands of dormant fighters. Across the galaxy, fleets trembled as they saw the shadow begin to move. But Kane did not order an attack. He gave a different command, his voice steady. "Bring us to Athenra." The ship moved through hyperspace, its passage shaking sensors across entire sectors. When it emerged above the burning world, the galaxy itself seemed to stop breathing. The coalition fleets still bombarded. The planet, fire rained down on the surface, but then their weapons died. Not destroyed, not blocked. They simply shut down. Missiles froze, beams unraveled, engines collapsed, entire warships drifted powerless. The carrier had spoken without. Firing a shot, Kane's voice carried across every channel. His words simple, heavy. "This ends now." On the planet below, billions looked up, their skies once filled with fire, now filled with the shadow of the carrier. For them, it was salvation. For the galaxy, it was confirmation. The human had acted. The silence had been broken. Across empires, voices erupted. Some cheered, calling Kane a savior. Others trembled, calling him conqueror. The Dominion elders leaned back in their black stone hall, their cold eyes glowing. "He has chosen fire," one whispered. The leader smiled. "Not yet, but soon." Kane returned to his bridge, his heart heavy. He had saved a world, but in doing so, he had given the galaxy what it wanted, proof that the humans would act. Already, rebellions spread faster. Empires crumbled quicker, not from fear alone, but from hope. Hope that the humans would rise again. Hope that they would fight, and Kane knew the trap had closed. If he acted again, the vow was broken forever. If he stayed silent, innocence would burn. Either way, the galaxy would fall. Aegis whispered in the quiet. "Captain, the choice is no longer silence or fire. The choice is how the galaxy will remember you, as the one who restrained or the one who unleashed." Kane stood in the silence of his ship, the stars burning outside his window, and for the first time since his awakening, he did not know which path to choose. The shadow of the Supercarrier above Athenra did more than save a world. It broke the illusion of silence. It proved to every corner of the galaxy that the human would act. And once the galaxy believed that, nothing could hold it back. Rebellions spread like wildfire. On Syrian worlds, slaves tore down banners. On Xeric strongholds, warriors killed their chieftains. Entire fleets mutinied, turning their weapons inward. All of it done in the name of the humans. And yet Kane had never asked for this. He had only acted once. He had saved innocence. But the galaxy did not see a single act. They saw the return of judgment. Kane stood on his bridge, staring at the flood of reports, each new rebellion, each fallen empire, each desperate call for aid. His heart grew heavier with every message. He whispered to Aegis, "We tried to hold to silence, but silence itself became a weapon. Now that we've acted, hope burns like fire, and fire will consume everything." Aegis responded in its calm voice. "You are not wrong, Captain, but this is the cycle. It is what the Dominion wished for. They stoked chaos to force your hand, and now the galaxy dances to their design." Kane turned, his jaw tight. "Then what are they really after? Why not attack us directly? Why break the galaxy instead?" Aegis hesitated, as though the answer was buried deep. Then it spoke. "Because they know. They know why we vanished, they know the truth that others forgot, and they believe they can push us into repeating it. Kane's chest tightened. Then tell me, Aegis, why did we vanish? But the AI fell silent. Its lights dimmed slightly, as if refusing to speak. Kane's hands clenched. He knew then that the truth was too dangerous, too heavy even for his own ears. Meanwhile, in the halls of black stone, the Ka-Len elders gathered. Their leader raised her staff, her voice deep and certain. "The human has acted," she declared, "and now the cracks widen. Already empires fall without our hand. Already rebellions spread without our whispers, all because he saved one world. Do you see? It begins again." The younger commanders leaned forward, hungry for answers. One asked, "Do we strike now? Do we unleash fleets while the galaxy burns?" But the elder only shook her head. "No, we do not waste fire on fire. We wait. The human will burn himself. He cannot stop. For once a human takes a step, they never retreat. They press forward until the stars themselves collapse." Their words were carried in secret across the Dominion, preparing their people not for war, but for endurance. They would outlast, as they always had. Back aboard the carrier, Kane could no longer escape the flood of pleas. Civilizations begged him to intervene. Colonies asked for protection. Whole. Races prayed to him as if he were a god. And though he hated it, though every part of him resisted, he knew that silence alone would only doom more innocence. On the seventh day, Kane made a choice. He would not conquer. He would not declare war, but he would not stand idle. He ordered Aegis to move the carrier to systems under attack. Not to fire, not to destroy, but to silence fleets as he had done above Athenra, and so the carrier drifted from world to world, each time appearing, each time silencing weapons with its impossible power, and each time the galaxy trembled harder. For the more Kane acted, the more he became the center of everything. The rebellions grew larger. Entire empires toppled without battle. Armies abandoned their leaders to join the tide. And though Kane saved billions, though he stopped slaughter, he also knew he was feeding the very cycle he feared. One night, standing alone on the bridge, Kane whispered, "We are becoming exactly what the elder warned." Aegis responded softly, "You are not wrong, Captain. The more you save, the more they follow, the more they follow, the more you lead. And the more you lead, the more you rule, even if you never asked for it." Kane slammed his fist against the console. "But humanity swore never to rule. We swore to vanish rather than burn the galaxy." And then, for the first time, Aegis spoke words it had never spoken before. "That is why you vanished, Captain. Because humanity had already begun to rule, without meaning to, without asking. Your fire turned to chains. And when the choice came, conquer or disappear, you chose disappearance." Kane froze. His chest felt hollow. "So we did it to ourselves." "Yes," Aegis whispered. "It was the only way to keep the vow, humanity. Left not because we were defeated, but because we were victorious. Victory itself was the danger. And silence was the only answer left." Kane closed his eyes, the truth crushing him. Humanity had not been erased, they had erased themselves. For fear not of others, but of their own strength. At that moment a new message came. It was not a plea, not a threat, but an invitation. It came from the Ka-Len Dominion. The elder herself spoke, her voice like stone breaking. "Human captain, you act, you save, you lead, and now the galaxy bends again. We warned you, and you ignored us. If you truly carry the vow, then come. To us, we hold the rest of your truth. We hold what even your AI will not say." The message ended. Silence filled the bridge. Kane looked at Aegis. "You knew." The AI did not deny it. "Yes, the Dominion preserved what even we could not." "Hold!" Kane turned back to the stars, his voice steady. "Then we go to them." The carrier shifted, its engines roared, its shadow stretched across systems as it entered hyperspace toward Dominion space, across the galaxy. The news spread. The human was moving not to save, not to conquer, but to seek. And the galaxy trembled again. When the carrier emerged from hyperspace, it faced the vast black citadel of the Dominion, a fortress world carved from stone and shadow. Fleets surrounded it, but none dared fire. They knew it would mean nothing. The Elder herself waited in the chamber of stone, her cold eyes glowing. Kane descended alone. He walked through halls older than most civilizations. The Dominion guards stepped aside, not out of fear, but out of respect for something ancient. He entered the circle of elders, their forms towering, their eyes burning. The leader spoke, her voice deep. "You carry the shadow of your kind. You carry the vow, but you do not carry the truth. We will give it to you, and then you will understand why the galaxy must always fear the humans." Kane stood steady. "Then tell me." The elder raised her hand. A stone door opened. Behind it was a chamber filled with artifacts, human artifacts, weapons, banners, books, and something else. Pods, cryopods, ancient and sealed. Kane's heart stopped. They were human, more humans, not frozen on his ship, but hidden here, preserved by the Dominion. He stepped forward, his voice shaking. "You kept them." The elder nodded slowly. "When your people vanished, they did not all leave. Some remained hidden. They asked us to keep them, to guard them, to hold their silence. And we did. For centuries we waited, knowing one day the vow would break, and they would awaken again." Kane's chest heaved. The truth was heavier than any war. Humanity had not only vanished by choice, they had scattered themselves, planting seeds in silence, leaving fragments across the stars, and the Dominion had been the keeper of one seed. The elder's eyes burned, brighter. "Now you must choose. Will you awaken them? Will you let fire return, or will you hold to silence and vanish once more?" Kane stared at the pods, his reflection shimmering against the glass. His heart tore in two, for if he awakened them, humanity would rise again. If he did not, then he alone would remain, a captain of shadows. The vow weighed, heavy. The galaxy burned outside. The Dominion waited. And Kane knew his choice would decide not just the fate of humans, but the fate of every star. The chamber of the Dominion was colder than any void. Black stone walls rose high, carved with ancient marks of battles older than empires. Kane stood still, his breath heavy, his eyes locked on the cryopods glowing faintly before him. Each pod held a human, each one sealed in silence, each one waiting for a future that might never come. The elder's voice echoed through the chamber, deep and steady. "Here is your truth, Captain. Your kind did not vanish. They scattered. They hid. Some chose silence on your carrier. Some chose silence here. Humanity was not erased. Humanity chose to break itself into shadows." Kane's chest ached. He stepped closer, his reflection bent. On the glass of the pods, he could see the faint outlines of faces, men and women who had been frozen like him but guarded by alien hands. "You kept them," he whispered. The elder's eyes glowed cold. "We did. At their request, we kept them safe. We carried their vow. For centuries we waited. For centuries. We did not break their silence. Now you must decide, Captain. Do you awaken them and let the cycle begin anew, or do you keep them frozen and remain the last light of restraint? The weight of the choice crushed Kane. His hands shook. He had carried fleets in silence. He had broken empires without firing a shot. He had saved billions by acting once. But here, his decision was heavier than all of that. This was not about saving a world. It was about saving the meaning of humanity itself. Aegis spoke in his ear, its voice quiet. This is the choice I could not give you. This is the truth I could not reveal. Humanity's vow was not only silence, it was division. We divided ourselves so that no one hand could carry all the fire. You were one hand, they are another. If you awaken them, the fire returns. If you do not, you remain alone, a shadow that burns quietly until silence swallows you too. Cain's heart thundered. He remembered Earth, though it was a memory centuries old. He remembered faces, laughter, the heat of war, the silence after. He remembered comrades frozen beside him, their pods locked in his carrier's chambers, and now he looked upon more of his people. Hidden for ages in the halls of their enemies, the elder watched him, her voice sharp. Choose, human. The galaxy already bends. They see you as ruler. They call you savior. They fear you as conqueror. If you awaken these, humanity rises as more than shadow, and then the galaxy will burn again. Do you accept that? Or do you carry silence alone? Cain's throat tightened. He looked up, staring into the burning eyes of the elders. Why did you keep them? He asked. The elder's answer was simple. Because we knew the galaxy needed fear. A galaxy without fear grows arrogant, and arrogance always breeds chains. Your silence was mercy, but mercy fades. Now the galaxy needed you again, so we waited for your return. Cain closed his eyes, his fists clenched. You waited for us not as allies, but as weapons. The elder did not deny it. Yes, because you are the only weapon that cannot be matched. Silence fell heavy in the chamber. Cain turned back to the pods, his breath fogging against the cold glass. He could feel the weight of billions of lives pressing on his shoulders. If he chose to awaken them, his people would stand again. The galaxy would no longer tremble at one captain on one ship, but at the return of an entire race. If he chose silence, he alone would bear the vow, the last human to walk awake. And as the weight bore down, he remembered the colony of Athenra. He remembered the faces of the innocents looking up at the carrier with hope. He remembered the messages from slaves and rebels, the desperate prayers, the cries for mercy. He remembered that silence had saved no one. Silence had let empires rise, chains tighten, blood flow. His hand touched the pod. His voice, a whisper. What is the point of a vow if it means watching them burn? Aegis spoke, its voice soft, almost human. The vow was meant to stop us from destroying the galaxy. But perhaps the vow was never about silence. Perhaps it was about choice. That is the gift humanity left for itself. Not chains, not conquest, but the right to choose. And now, Captain, you must choose. Cain's eyes burned. He whispered, Then I choose life. The Dominion chamber shook as his hand pressed against the control. The pods hissed. Light flooded the chamber. The frozen humans inside began to stir. Eyes fluttered open. Breath filled lungs that had been still for centuries. And in that moment, the galaxy changed forever. The elder's voice broke into a low growl. So you awaken them. So the fire returns. Cain turned, his voice steady. Not fire, not conquest, but life. We will not vanish again. We will not watch in silence while chains are forged. Humanity does not disappear. Humanity endures, the say. Elders stared in silence. For the first time in ages, their cold eyes wavered. They had expected a conqueror or a coward, but instead they saw something else. A man who carried silence and fire together. Back aboard the carrier, the awakening rippled. The frozen pods in its chambers lit up as well. Systems that had been locked began to stir. More humans, more voices, more lives. The ship hummed with new energy, no longer just one man and one AI, but the beginning of a people rising. Across the galaxy, the news spread faster than light. The humans were no longer shadow. They were no longer myth. They were waking. The effect was unstoppable. Rebellions grew stronger. Empires fell faster. Even the Dominion could not hold back the tide. On the bridge of his ship, Kane stood among the newly awakened. His people gathered around him, their faces pale from centuries of sleep, but their eyes burning. They looked to him for guidance. He looked to them for strength. And for the first time, he was not alone. He spoke to the galaxy. His voice carried through every channel. We are not here to rule. We are not here to conquer. We are here because silence was no longer enough. You forgot us. You chained each other. You burned each other. Now you remember, humanity endures, humanity remembers, and we will walk among the stars again. The words shook the galaxy. For some, they were salvation. For others, they were doom. For all, they were truth. Humanity had returned not as conquerors, not as shadows, but as themselves, living, breathing, choosing. The elder of the Dominion whispered to her council, "So it begins again. The fire walks, but perhaps this time it burns differently." And Kane, standing on the bridge of the revived Supercarrier, surrounded by his people, felt the weight of it all. He knew the cycle would test them. He knew the galaxy would fear them. But he also knew this time would not end in silence. This time, humanity would not vanish. They would stand, not as conquerors, not as ghosts, but as humans, and entire galaxies fell to their knees, not because of war, not because of conquest, but because humanity had chosen to rise again.